A serial rapist terrorizes women in the Florida night.
I tried to get out.
Got a gun.
Armed and brutal, he frightens them into silence. As investigators uncover details of his crimes, they need to track him down and stop his vicious rampage. When authorities in Jacksonville, Florida, discover a series of violent rapes, some of which occur at a graveyard, they struggle to identify the rapist. Prosecutor Libby Senterfitt must also track down the terrified victims and hope they are willing to face their attacker in court.
He had committed heinous, brutal crimes against these women, and we wanted to find this man and get justice for them and put him behind bars where he belonged.
Some names in this episode have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. Late on the night of August 1st, 1995, in Jacksonville, Florida, a woman escaped from a brutal rapist after being repeatedly assaulted. Dazed and unsure where she was, she wandered the streets, hoping she could make her way home before the rapist found her again.
You stay away from... Oh, help me.
No.
She told the officer she had been abducted at gunpoint and raped.
He's after you. He's after you, ma'am.
Please don't let him hurt me.
No one's going to hurt
He
you.
immediately took her to Jacksonville's Sexual Treatment Center.
Help me.
Have a seat. Have a seat.
Help me.
Doctors first made sure the woman was stable and not in pain. They created a rape kit, taking samples of seminal fluid to be compared against samples from any suspects police might later find. 31-year-old Angie Webster described her ordeal to a counselor.
You're gonna be fine, Angie.
She had been abducted, taken to a cemetery, and repeatedly raped.
I want to get out of here.
Angie, what are you holding?
She gave the counselor a sock that her attacker had used to blindfold her.
People blindfolded me with that.
The sock might contain some link to the attacker's identity.
Take a look at this. She had this.
It was later entered into evidence at the police station.
It was blindfold on her.
Police did not have a license plate number or any other way to find the rapist. The sock was their only clue. Police had to file the report with other unsolved sexual assaults in the area. Growing cold among the dozens of open cases, it seemed Angie Webster's case might never be solved. More than a month later, Jacksonville Sheriff's Detective Diana Clarke made a startling discovery.
I was on call in the office, and a patrol officer brought in a suspect on another rape case. And I was trying to find the original report for that case. So I pulled a lot of reports from that area around the time frame that the rape had occurred. And that's when I started discovering there was a pattern involved. I started looking into it a little bit further and found out that we possibly had a serial rape case going on the north side.
The detective looked more thoroughly at the unsolved rape cases.
I noticed a similarity in vehicle descriptions, the location, which was a cemetery, and also the method of operation. The victims were all from a certain area of town. It's a high crime area. They were all walking out late at night for whatever reason. They could have, some of them were just walking to the store, some of them were walking to a friend's house.
Another officer in the sex crimes unit, Detective Tom Hackney, offered to assist in reviewing the open cases.
Going through some of the case files, I kept finding more and more and more, and the farther back I went, the more I was able to find. it had the snowball effect. The facts of each case were so particular and so altogether the same. I would read a report and know right away that it was connected with the other ones. The terms and the verbiage that the suspect was using in these cases and the way that he would approach the women and what he would say to them, he had so many of the mannerisms that were alike in each one of the cases that it was easily identifiable as one of his cases.
It was clear that they were after a serial rapist who had been prowling Jacksonville's north side for years. To further develop their case, the detectives needed to track down each of the victims from the unsolved incidents. But that was difficult, especially for some of the older cases.
Years later, it's not an easy thing to do. Try to find the latest information that's publicly available about them, their driver's license information. But mostly it was actually getting out, walking their neighborhoods and trying to find their last known addresses and those who knew them. Basically, foot detective work, getting out, beating the streets, trying to find friends and family members who could identify where these women were at the time.
They began with the addresses in the original reports. In most cases, the women had moved, so detectives talked with the new tenants, hoping someone knew where the victims went.
That she was familiar with.
We ran, background checks on these women to see if we could locate them that way. Some of them just totally disappeared out of the area. But we ended up, finding a few of them.
We just have a couple more questions.
Each time they located a victim, the detectives interviewed her to get more information about her ordeal and the attacker. The detectives asked the victims to describe the assailant. He was a black male in his 30s or 40s. Many of the victims reported being forced into a red car at gunpoint. Detectives also noted a similarity in the names the suspect used.
We had developed information from talking to the victims about the red car and about the letter V. The victims would remember some of them actually that he used the name Vernon, others that he had just used something with the letter V.
Some victims also said he used the name Robert. The detectives now had some leads, but they had no direct identification.
Can I get you anything? How's it coming?
To further narrow the investigation, police sketch artists worked with victims to create composites of the rapist.
Can you make us nice a little bit? Sure.
The local media picked up the story, dubbing the perpetrator the North Side Rapist. The press coverage meant citizens might call with helpful information, but it also complicated the detectives' investigation.
Now, the man who was responsible for these crimes knew that we knew that he was out there.
If he went into hiding, they might never find him. With the case moving forward quickly, detectives decided to get prosecutors involved right away.
We actually started working with the state attorney's office prior to us even having a suspect, which is unusual, but in this case, we wanted to make sure that we did everything correctly. It was such a big case, and we knew that it was going to be big. So we wanted to make sure that when we went out to do our investigations and talk to these girls that we got everything that the state attorney was going to need later on.
They contacted the director of the Jacksonville State Attorney's Office Special Assault Unit, Libby Senterfitt.
The sheriff's office and our office worked together at that point to try to put together a complete case. They know what they need from the police perspective, but then there is from the trial perspective, and that's always what we're looking at. What do we need to put this case in front of a jury?
On October 9th, 1995, detectives interviewed Angie Webster. In August, police had found her dazed and wandering the streets. She described what happened that night.
It's dark outside.
She said that at 11:30 p.m., she was walking home from a convenience store when a red car pulled up next to her.
Got a gun, get in the car.
The driver ordered her to get in.
Hurry up.
He said he wouldn't hurt her if she obeyed. He blindfolded her with a black sock so she couldn't see where they went next. She tried to escape, but there was no door handle.
I got your driver's license now. I know where you live.
He found her driver's license and told her if she didn't do what he said, he would go to her home and kill her family.
Do you understand?
The threat terrified the single mother. Angie Webster would do anything to protect her
This is my
daughter.
daughter, Dominique. Dominique, this is Detective Hackney and Clarke.
She had to follow the gunman's instructions.
Then what happened?
He drove to a graveyard where he repeatedly assaulted her. Keeping her license, he said he would track her down and kill her if she ever told anyone what happened. A police officer found her, and she told him about the graveyard.
He took the report and he called an evidence technician out, and they were able to take photographs of the actual grave where he took her, and her clothes were still laying on the empty grave.
Returning to the sex crimes unit, the detectives learned there had been a break in the case.
We had a tip come in on the hotline that our suspect was a police officer. The caller was anonymous, so we never got to talk to who it was, but they told us that it was a police officer. He gave us some names, so we started looking into that.
Officer Robert V. Manning was an 8-year veteran of the force. His name fit what the rapist had told the victims, and he owned a red car.
When we first got this tip, so many of the pieces of the puzzle were fitting together with this officer, and it gave us a pretty sick feeling because, you know, everything was just fitting perfectly. You know, even when we got the composite sketch, it even looked a little bit like this officer. And naturally, you know, we didn't want it to be him, but, you know, we were prepared for the fact that it could be.
As the facts pointed to one of their own, the detectives grew more concerned.
We knew that at some point in time we would have to actually sit down and interview him. And the officer that was identified is one of the better investigators and better interviewers that we have on this department. So it's kind of a tricky situation to be in.
They met with the supervisor of the sex crimes unit. The sergeant agreed that there was enough probable cause to ask the police officer for an interview. It would not be easy.
Bring him in. Thank you.
Appreciate it if you'd give us a few minutes of your time to answer some questions for us.
On November 7th, 1995, the detectives met with Officer Robert V. Manning.
Do you still live in the hillside?
If the veteran officer were in fact a criminal, his police training would make him evidence conscious and wary of interview techniques.
You ever have occasion to ride up and down that road in the evenings?
Well, occasionally, yeah.
They explained why they had requested an interview and asked him about his red car and why he might have been seen in the area in question.
Sure, whatever you need.
At each turn, he had a reasonable answer.
Thank you very much.
Investigators had secured samples of seminal fluid from the victims, and a DNA profile of the rapist was being created. The detectives needed to see if Officer Manning's DNA matched. They asked him for a voluntary blood sample for comparison.
Talking to the district attorney.
Yeah.
He agreed. But comparing it to the DNA from the Northside rapist would take time. Detectives Clarke and Hackney worked the case exclusively. They spent hours poring over reports of unsolved rapes going back 10 years. Each time they found a case with a similar MO, they added it to their list. Eventually, that list topped 100 cases. They realized they were dealing with a maniac who would not stop terrorizing women until he was put away forever. Detectives worked closely with Jacksonville prosecutors Laura Havey-Bear and Libby Senterfitt.
We knew it was not going to be an easy case to try. We talked to Diana and to Tom Hackney about locating witnesses that appeared to make a really good case. We asked them about whether or not there was a rape kit and whether or not that rape kit had been taken to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to pursue DNA evidence.
Weeks later, the investigators received the DNA results regarding Officer Robert Manning.
The officer was eliminated as a suspect when the DNA did not match the DNA that the suspect in the rapes had left.
Knowing their fellow officer was innocent was a relief to the detectives. But the Northside rapist was still out there, and there was no telling when he would strike again. In the fall of 1995, Jacksonville police discovered that a serial rapist was terrorizing the north side of the city. Driving a red car and using the names Robert or Vernon, the attacker abducted women at gunpoint, then raped them repeatedly. Prosecutors and detectives had uncovered nearly 100 unsolved cases, according to Detective Tom Hackney.
When I started developing these number of cases, there's an urgency to want to solve this, because you see how many women he's actually attacked and how many women he's approached and done this to, that as a person, you want to solve this because there's a danger to the community. There are these women who are out there getting attacked, and you've discovered it, and now it's your job and your responsibility to find the man who did this, to catch him and to stop him.
Investigators tracked down another victim, Dolores Lang. She agreed to speak with them.
Mrs. Lang, I've been going over your file and
They needed more detailed information about the rapist and someone willing to testify in court.
If you would, what happened that night?
Like the other women they had spoken to, Dolores was terrified.
How much I remember.
The detective explained they were trying to get the rapist off the streets.
It was at night, and I was
He asked
walking
her
along
about her
32nd
ordeal.
Street, and this car pulled up.
She said that night she was on 32nd Street in the city's north side when a red car approached. The driver said he had a question.
Give me some directions to somewhere. Come here.
When she got closer to the car, he pulled a gun.
No,
Get in the
please,
car.
look, I don't
Gonna
want
have to
any
kill
trouble,
you.
please.
Just get
He
in
said
the
he would
car.
kill her if she didn't get in.
Please don't.
Give me your purse. Let me have it.
Here, take
Just
it.
shut up.
Take it. Just
Shut up,
please
will
don't
you?
hurt me.
Like the others, Dolores reported that the man grabbed her driver's license and threatened to kill her and her family if she did not obey him.
Anybody about this, I'll come around there and kill you and
No,
your kid.
not my
Do you
kid,
understand?
please.
That night, he raped her twice. First, he took her to a radio station parking lot and assaulted her. Then, he drove to a deserted area near some railroad tracks and attacked her again. She escaped when he tried a third time at a graveyard.
If I could get a photo spreadsheet of...
She told the detective she believed she could identify the attacker's photo.
Yeah, I'll look at it, but I won't testify. I won't testify in court. I won't let him kill my kids. I will not testify.
Investigators hoped she would change her mind.
Thank you very much.
If they found the suspect, they would need her as a witness.
That's why I noticed it first.
Detectives had compiled enough information about the rapist to run a statistical search. To uncover a suspect, they turned to the Crime Analysis Unit.
After reviewing this large number of reports, enough of these facts came through with the names that he used, with the color car that he had used. It led us as investigators to take those facts and enter them into a database, and hopefully with enough information something would come out.
Hey, Bob.
He's a call, Bob.
How you doing, officers?
Doing fine.
On November 13th, the detectives requested the Analysis Unit cross-reference police records on a broad scale. They searched the arrest records of all black males using the name Robert, or any name beginning with the letter V.
R-O-B-E-R-T.
Blackmail.
They then compared those to registered owners of red sports cars.
Plate mop.
Such a wide search could yield hundreds of names and would take time to complete.
As soon as I get the printouts and info, I'll give you a call.
Great.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Sure enough, good seeing you again.
While the analysis continued, detectives hoped they could find the car the suspect drove.
In reviewing the reports, there were several distinctive features about the car that he would use when he would approach these women. So Detective Clarke and I would actually go out in the evening times in unmarked cars looking for this red car, trying to find a red car in that area that matched his description.
Whenever they saw a red car with a single driver, their hopes were raised. They looked for the identifying features described by the victims. They never found the car.
Descriptions.
Eventually, the Crime Analysis Unit compiled their report.
However, the information you gave me referenced the names.
They showed the detectives hundreds of suspects from their name search.
Yielded 10 names of known sex offenders.
But the cross-reference to red cars narrowed the list down to less than 10 for Detective Diana Clarke.
Okay?
Thanks.
Glad to help.
They ran a printout with all the names of all the suspects who had ever been arrested, fitting any of that method of operation or car color. And once we got the list, we started going through the list, and Tom actually went down to the records and ID section and pulled physical reports, and he kind of zeroed in on Everett Grant because he was the best one at the time. He fit the profile the best.
Everett Vernon Grant had a record. In 1975, he was arrested for sexual battery and kidnapping. He owned a red sports car, and he lived less than a mile from the area where the rapes had occurred.
When I went and actually identified and pulled Everett Vernon Grant's record and read the arrest report from the 70s and looked at the way the report was written, I had read so many of the reports looking for victims in the case, and I knew when a report was involving him from the way it was written. When I pulled that arrest jacket and opened it up and saw Everett Vernon Grant's arrest and read the report, it read the exact same way as the reports from the 1990s read. And that just floored me, that this had been going on possibly for this long in the same way.
As Tom would put it, it was almost like the suspect wrote all these reports. So when he read this narrative, it was like, this is the guy, because everything fit perfectly. The puzzle had finally come together. So we took the picture of this guy and put him in a photo spread with 5 other photos and took this photo spread around to the victims.
Take your time.
For some of the women, it had been months or years since they had seen their attacker. But their memories were clear.
Are you sure?
In each and every case, it was an immediate positive identification. That's the man who did it. Boom, that's the man who did it. It was quick and it was positive on each one of these girls' parts that Everett Vernon Grant was the one who had abducted and raped each one of them.
That's him right there. That's him.
If Everett Vernon Grant was the Northside rapist, Jacksonville detectives had to find him quickly and make sure he was taken off the streets before he struck again.
Just get in the car.
In 1995, Jacksonville police had identified a suspect in a series of brutal sexual assaults in the city's north side. Several victims identified Everett Vernon Grant as the rapist. None of the victims wanted to face him in court. But before a trial could take place, detectives needed to find and arrest Grant, and do so with no mistakes that could hurt the prosecution. Detectives Diana Clarke and Tom Hackney worked with prosecutors in the State Attorney's Special Assault Unit.
We sat down and immediately worked to develop a search warrant for his house and an arrest warrant for him, and we wanted to do that as quickly as possible because of the fact we knew he was still actively out there committing these crimes, and time is of the essence, and we needed to get it then and get it fast.
With the witness IDs, the arrest warrant was simple, but outlining the search warrant was more difficult for prosecutor Laura Havey-Bear.
When you search a house, you can't just search for anything. You've got to put in the search warrant what it is, in fact, you're looking for, and why would the police be expected to find it there. Most of the victims were raped at gunpoint. but there were a couple of victims that were raped at knife point. The victims described 3 or 4 different automobiles. The victims described certain articles of clothing. So we had to draft a narrative that said, victim number 1 identified her attacker as a certain person who drove a certain kind of car and indicated that a large 6-inch Bowie knife was used during her sexual battery. And it takes a couple days to prepare.
Kobe, did you look at this? Hendrickson.
While they waited for the search warrant to be processed, investigators designed a plan to ensure no other women were attacked.
Once we identified Grant as the suspect in the case, we set up some surveillance on him, put officers watching him and his house to make sure that he was not going to get out and do that again.
Yeah, I think that's it.
On November 15, 1995, a judge signed an arrest warrant for Everett Vernon Grant and a search warrant for the house he shared with his mother. When he left for work in the morning, an arrest team followed him. Another team then served the search warrant to Grant's mother.
Diana Clarke with the Jefferson County Police Department. We have a warrant to inspect the premises.
Receiving word the search warrant was executed, police moved on Grant.
That looks like him.
They believed he would not be armed at work. They hoped the ex-con would not resist.
When we physically arrested Everett Vernon Grant for these crimes, he was cooperative with the officers when he made the arrest. He didn't put up any fight. He gave us an indication that he pretty much knew that we were coming after him.
Authorities now had a suspect in custody, but they needed direct evidence to link him to the assaults. At Grant's house, police, led by Detective Diana Clarke, moved forward with the search warrant.
We wanted to be able to get into his home so we could look for any evidence from any of these crimes, such as the victims' ID cards that he took from them, or blindfolds that he may have used. And we wanted to get any clothing that he may have worn, because we did have in some of the reports some of the descriptions of the clothing.
Make sure you get a picture of that.
The team searched Grant's bedroom, looking for anything that might tie him to any of the victims.
When we went and did the search warrant, we didn't find what we expected to find at his house. Because of the fact that Everett Vernon Grant had been watching the news, we felt like that he had actually taken some time to prepare for us coming.
Investigators did find a knife and a photograph of a red car that matched the descriptions given by some of the victims. Disappointed with the search, detectives began interviewing the suspect. After talking with Grant briefly, Detective Clarke realized he wasn't willing to talk to both of them.
People, they usually choose one of you, which one they're going to identify with, based on personality. Well, it was determined pretty early on in the interview that he didn't care for me too much. And so I just took notes while Detective Hackney actually performed the interview. I think sometimes he forgot that I was there, and he would talk pretty forthright with Detective Hackney.
Grant admitted he had picked up prostitutes in the area and said he refused to pay some of them. But he denied raping anyone and said he never pulled a gun. Grant's story changed several times during the interview. First, he denied ever using a blindfold on any of the women he picked up. Later, he admitted that he had. Detectives interviewed Grant for 5 hours. In the end, they didn't have a confession from the suspect, but they believed he had revealed incriminating information.
The interview went very well. He admitted to some things that I don't even think he really realized that he had admitted to. It turned out that the mother of his child was a prostitute, and I think that's where a lot of his anger came from in the later stages of his crime spree.
Jacksonville police charged Grant with sexual assault based on the positive identification by several women. Still, Proving Grant was the Northside rapist would not be easy, with no confession and little evidence recovered from the suspect's house. State attorneys Libby Senterfitt and Laura Havey Bear also had to contend with the fact that many of their witnesses were not strong ones.
I knew from looking at the victim's criminal records, and I knew from talking to the victim advocates that had been meeting with these victims, that a lot of the victims were going to be extremely difficult to put on the witness stand for a whole variety of reasons. Some of them were already dropping out. Some of them were already gone. Some of the victims that we found and we talked to were extremely reluctant to cooperate. We had women that called the event an accident. You know, they were forcibly raped at gunpoint, and they called it the accident because that was their way of identifying what had happened to them.
Despite the obstacles, the prosecutors knew they had to build a solid case that would convince a jury. Otherwise, the Northside rapist would be back on the streets to continue his brutal attacks. For years, the north side of Jacksonville, Florida, was plagued by a serial rapist. Armed and vicious, he attacked women alone at night, threatening to kill their families if they talked to police. Detectives found several victims who identified Everett Vernon Grant as their attacker. On November 15, 1995, police arrested him. He denied involvement, and investigators had no witnesses willing to testify in court. Checking descriptions and method of operation, police had discovered 24 unsolved rape cases that could be tied to Grant. But prosecutor Laura Havey Bear believed Grant was responsible for more.
The crime of rape is traditionally underreported. So I would suspect there were more than the 24 women who reported. I would suspect there were a whole lot more. I mean, this man was on a rape binge for years.
When they began outlining their case, prosecutor Libby Senterfitt realized they couldn't charge all 24 cases.
We had to determine how many counts we could charge against Everett Grant, involving how many victims. And we determined ultimately that we could charge 27 counts of sexual battery, kidnapping, and robbery against Everett Grant that involved 8 women.
They ultimately tracked down 7 witnesses. Legally, they had to identify them to the defense, and Grant's defense team planned to depose each one.
A criminal deposition in the state of Florida is really for 2 purposes. 1, it's to find out what the witness knows, and 2, it's to find out how good the witness is going to be on the witness stand, so you as a defense attorney can assess the strength of your case.
Running the depositions and Grant's defense was public defender Gonzalo Andux.
Our defense was that they had consensual sex and he was supposed to pay for this. He did not pay, and they got very angry at him.
During the depositions, the defense attorney planned to question the witnesses extensively.
It's a difficult thing for the victim to have to go through because she has to relive the crime with the defense attorney who was not on her side, who was asking her difficult questions, not just about the crime, not just making her relive this crime, but they're also digging for dirt on the witness. And so each of these victims had to go through that.
After the depositions, the state was ready to go to trial with charges regarding 8 rape victims, including the one they hadn't located yet. But their case was soon challenged.
The defense filed a motion to sever the counts. In other words, he said that we could not try all of these charges together in one trial, that there were in essence 8 separate trials here.
Prosecutors agreed to sever the charges.
We told the court that we would only try the counts involving one victim. But we also informed the court and the defense attorney at that time that we intended to use what we call Williams Rule.
The Williams Rule allows prosecutors to use evidence of similar but separate crimes to illustrate a defendant's history and method of operation. At a preliminary hearing, prosecutors planned to discuss Angie Webster, the one victim they could charge Grant with raping, plus 4 others they wanted to bring in under the Williams Rule.
Let's move right to the...
The judge made a ruling which allowed us to use 2 of the 4 we wanted to use.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
One of those selected was Dolores Lang, a victim who had previously refused to testify. The trial was only 18 hours away. Dolores still did not want to be there.
I told Laura and them, I said, I will help you in any kind of way that I can, but I am not getting up there on that stand. I just constantly said I wasn't going to do it, not up on the stand.
The judge met with Dolores and asked about her testimony.
I assure you, all you need to do is to tell us your story tomorrow. Do you have any questions?
She was just scared. She was very scared. This was a horrible crime that had been committed against her. And understandably, she really didn't want to have to come into court and face him.
Assured by the judge that she was safe, Dolores finally agreed to testify. Now, the prosecutors were ready for trial.
All rise and give your attention. The Honorable Justice Michael Bilski of the Jacksonville Court. Court is now in session.
On May 8, 1996, the trial of Everett Grant began in Jacksonville's Duval County Courthouse.
At this time, if the attorneys wish, they can make their opening statements to you.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
In her opening statement, Laura Havey-Bear humanized the victims for the jury.
I wanted them to care about these people. They were going to hear a lot of stuff about these women, a lot of bad things. So when I stood up to give my opening statement, I was thinking, I have got to make these people care about these women, like Libby and I have grown to care about them.
By a man who stopped
The prosecutor talked about each of the victims, explaining they were mothers, daughters, sisters. And they had been targeted, stalked, and viciously attacked. Grant's defense team had a different version of the incidents. They argued their client had engaged in consensual sex with the women and hoped to discredit the witness's testimony.
Our game plan basically was to show all the inconsistencies that they had in order to show that there was something wrong here. I think it's important to look at why there are inconsistencies in certain cases.
The defense contended the witnesses changed their stories because they were not being entirely truthful.
Thank you, Mr. Sobering. The state may call their first witness.
The state called Detective Diana Clarke.
Can you tell us how these unsolved cases were similar?
Yes, I can. The area of town was the same. The method used to pick up the victims was similar.
The detective testified about discovering similarities in numerous rape cases, interviewing the victims, and developing Grant as a suspect due to victims identifying his car and photo.
More than one time, the victims...
Judge, I would object.
The defense objected and called for a mistrial.
Do you need the court reporter?
Yes, please.
It is improper for a detective to keep calling somebody a victim if in trial it's an issue whether they were a victim or not. In a case like this where somebody's saying she was raped and you're saying there was no rape, it is important not to have people that weren't there discuss the incident by calling her a victim every time they mention her. It is improper to mention the site where this happened as the rape site, because all they're doing is creating a mindset to find somebody guilty, and that is wrong.
3 cases.
If the judge agreed and declared a mistrial, the case would be over, and Everett Grant would go free.
Your Honor.
In the rape trial of Everett Grant, the defense contended their client had had consensual sex with the women involved. When prosecutors repeatedly referred to the women as victims, the defense called for a mistrial. The judge overruled the objection, and the trial continued. But the defense was successful in limiting the lead detective's testimony. She could only discuss 3 of the 24 alleged victims.
State may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Angie Webster.
Angie testified about what happened to her on the night of August 1st, 1995. She said Grant had forced her into his car at gunpoint, blindfolded her, and raped her repeatedly. During cross-examination, defense attorney Gonzalo Andux claimed the witness was not credible.
Isn't it true that you met Mr. Grant that night?
No, that isn't true.
And that you got in the car consensually?
No, that's not true.
And that you suggested where to park that car?
No.
She had to explain why she got in a person's car without being injured.
No, that isn't true.
Her testimony was that he put a gun to her and blindfolded her, and that made absolutely no sense because she was able to describe his face, the inside of the car, the outside of the car, the color of the car, things inside the car that were inconsistent with a person having been blindfolded all night.
As Angie finished her testimony, prosecutors hoped the jury sympathized with her and believed her story.
More questions, Your Honor.
Next witness.
The state then called Dolores Lang. She took the stand, although she was still afraid of facing Everett Grant again.
I had to look him in his face. It's like I'm sitting here now, I'm looking him directly in the face, and he's giving me this, look. And it was the scariest look. I mean, you never seen a look like that. And I was scared. I was afraid that I didn't know, what would happen afterwards if we had lost that case.
Miss Lang, how old are you?
I'm 34.
And where do you live?
It's on the north side.
Miss Lang, I'm going to have to ask you to speak up a little bit. We want everyone to hear you, especially the jury.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me take you back to the night of March 29th, 1995. Now, do you remember what
Dolores
you were doing
bravely
that evening?
testified about being forced into Grant's car at gunpoint.
I was raped twice. He took me first to, I can't remember the station name, it's a save station. He first took me there and he blindfolded me. I can remember it was something tight like a stocking. And he took me somewhere else, and I could hear a train, and I felt bumps, like I was on a track or something like that. So that was the second time. He said that he was going to take me to a place where he took his other victims. It was at the graveyard, but they had the grave that set off the ground. It was dresses, sweaters, jackets. It was just a big circle, and he had them all just like it was women's laying around, but it wasn't women, it was their clothes. But he never got that third chance because I fought back. And he screamed, and he jumped to get a gun, so I was shot at more than once. But I ran anyway, and he just kept running behind me. I know you hear me. And he kept saying over and over, oh, I get you, and I get all of your kids. And that's all he kept saying. And I just continued to run.
Could you please identify the man who abducted and raped you?
The state asked Dolores to point out her attacker. Despite her fear, she pointed to Everett Vernon Grant.
Right there on the end.
The record will show that the witness has identified the defendant.
Prosecutor Libby Senterfitt.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And ultimately, Dolores was a terrific, courageous witness on the stand.
You're dismissed.
It was the scariest day of my life, but then it was also a big relief to know that you got people like Laura and Lily that works very hard with you.
Next, the prosecution focused on the DNA evidence against Grant. Their expert witness testified about matching Grant's DNA with evidence collected in 2 of the victims' rape kits, according to prosecutor Laura Havey-Bear.
DNA is science, you know. If you've got DNA saying the evidence found from rape scene number 1 is identical to the evidence found from rape scene number 2, from rape scene number 3, 4, and it's all going back to this defendant, I mean, that pretty much proves to a jury that this is the guy.
Isn't it true that
But the defense pointed out that the presence of the DNA only proved a sexual act had occurred. It did not prove rape. On May 10th, after the state and the defense had rested their cases, the judge called for closing arguments.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The prosecution reviewed their case, contending they had proven that Grant had raped each of the women who testified.
Evidence will never tell.
They made sure the jury understood the horrific nature of the crimes.
Blindfold her.
I heard someone say one time that a rape is a homicide of the soul. And I think that's what Everett Grant committed in this case. He committed a homicide against their souls.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, the state...
The defense conceded that Grant had had sexual intercourse with the women, but they asserted that no physical evidence proved it had been rape at gunpoint. Grant's fate depended on whether the jury believed the testimony of the victims.
The victims, the women in this case, ultimately made this case. They had been brutalized, they had been raped, they were scared, and I think the jury understood what had happened.
After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Everett Vernon Grant was sentenced to 3 life terms.
Jacksonville, Duval County, Florida. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
For Dolores Lang, the painful process of testifying is helping her heal.
I know there's help out there. They help me. They help me, and I know if they help me, they can help somebody else. I try to tell people, if it happened to them, make sure they go forward and let somebody know. It feels better inside getting it out.
Prosecutor Libby Senterfitt hopes the case will send a message to the community.
I think it's important that the community know that the crime of rape can happen to anybody, and we need to be aware of that, and know, though, that there are people out there who care about this, who care about the people and the crime, and are going to seek justice.